Formula One is sometimes closer to a political game than a motorsport, as teams lobby the FIA for any kind of advantage they can get. Every media message is curated in some way to forward the story the teams are trying to spin, and there is always an ulterior motive to any complaints you hear. This season's main complaint has been the length of the DRS zones, and the complaints have rung out at most races so far. Are the DRS complaints justified though? Or are the teams just trying to get the FIA to make changes that favour them? Aston Martin certainly think they are, and today we'll check out what they have to say, whether DRS zones need changing, or if this is just a ploy to help themselves. The obvious place to start this video is with the complaints about the DRS zones themselves. Formula One drivers have questioned whether reducing the length of DRS zones, as happened at the last two Grand Prix in Azerbaijan and Miami, is the right move given the lack of overtaking in races so far in the 2023 season. In Azerbaijan, the DRS zone on the main straight was reduced by 100 meters. For the Miami Grand Prix, 2 of the 3 DRS zones were shortened by 75 meters compared to last year. The Grand Prix Drivers Association director George Russell was among those to question the move, given it was clear the DRS zone on the start-finish straight in Baku was not long enough. He had already suggested that the Baku change was made without F1 properly appreciating how much harder overtaking was becoming in 2023. "All of us didn't really understand why they've been shortened," said Russell. "None of us were consulted about it or asked our opinion on it. The race speaks for itself in Baku. I didn't know whether we're going to keep it the same for this weekend." DRS is there to aid overtaking, and it's always exciting when you've got these big DRS advantages, and it gives you that opportunity to fight. Clearly, in Baku, it was way too short. I'm gonna fact check some of these statements as we go through the video. Like I said in the opener, many teams curate their interview answers to push an agenda. In the case of George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, they've been united in trying to get the DRS zones lengthened, and have used the lack of overtaking at races as their reason. Not all of the drivers have complained about the DRS changes like George implies. Some are for the changes, but we'll get to that later. George specifically highlights the lack of overtaking in Baku 2023, which he blames on the shorter DRS zone. In 2022, there were a total of 23 overtakes from lap 2 onwards. In 2023, there were 23 again, so the changes to the DRS made no difference to the number of overtakes happening. That is just the facts. In my opinion, the Baku race was drier than a desert, but the changes to DRS didn't make a difference. Before 2021, it averaged 62 overtakes a race. From 2021 onwards, it's averaged 24.3 overtakes a race. I don't have a theory as to why that has happened. I checked, and there were changes to the barriers and curbs in 2021, but nothing that would cause a drop of almost 40 overtakes a race. George, as well as others, were vocal about the changes to the DRS zones in Miami as well. Again, the complaint was that it was harder to overtake this year, and shortening the DRS zones would make the race boring. The inaugural running of the race last year had 52 overtakes. This year, there were 60. I'm sure for both Baku and Miami, if the zones were longer, there would have been more overtakes. But from the look of our comment section on recent videos about the DRS complaints, many of you would prefer them to get rid of it completely rather than make it more prevalent. The drivers and the FIA are with you all as well, but as Lance Stroll says, that could only happen in an ideal world. "In an ideal world, we wouldn't have to rely on DRS to help overtaking," said the Aston Martin driver. So why are certain drivers trying to lobby the FIA into lengthening the DRS zones, or at least keeping them as long as last year? Well, the answer should be pretty obvious. It is because it helps them. Every F1 car has its own strengths and weaknesses. Some are faster in a straight line, some are faster through the slower corners, some are just straight up fast like the RB19. The W14, Mercedes 2023 car, is not straight up fast, nor is it fast in a straight line. The W14 is very aero inefficient. It creates plenty of downforce, but also creates plenty of drag. When it creates downforce consistently through a corner, which isn't very often admittedly, it is fast, but when it gets to the straights, it is one of the slower cars on the grid because of how much drag it creates. Hamilton and Russell were both in the bottom half of the table for top speed in both Miami and Azerbaijan. The top speed has been poor all year, especially for a team that wants to be challenging for race wins. The best way for a Formula 1 car to lower the amount of drag it creates, and therefore increase its top speed and acceleration, is to open the DRS. So, of course, Mercedes want the DRS zones to be as long as possible, because it helps to alleviate the car's biggest weakness. Aston Martin have taken note of this and aren't impressed. Aston Martin boss Mike Krack says it is time for teams to put the brakes on questioning the length of DRS zones with their own interests in mind. We need to calm down a little bit all these discussions about the DRS being too long, the DRS being too short, said the Aston Martin team principal. This is something that the FIA and F1 are doing at the tracks, and not everybody should be lobbying for what is best for themselves, because then it's up and down all the time. At the end of the day, the purpose of the DRS is to ease overtaking. Unfortunately, it's one of the few tools that we have, and we have to leave the decision makers to make the best decisions for the sport. You should now be questioning whether Mike Krack is trying to push his own agenda. Would having shorter DRS zones help Aston Martin in some way? Looking at the speeds through the speed traps in the first 5 races of the season, the answer is no. Aston Martin has consistently been one of the 10 slowest cars in terms of top speed. A longer DRS zone would help them make more overtakes just like Mercedes. Maybe Mike Krack is just a bit bored of all the complaining in the paddock. Fernando Alonso highlighted the fact that the added difficulty of following cars this year potentially makes the DRS zones more significant. But he also admitted that it is very car dependent, and highlighted the reasons why the FIA decided to cut 2 of the DRS zones in Miami. It, talking about overtaking, was easiest here last year apparently, so I think that's why the FIA shortened the DRS, said Alonso. In Baku, it was also one of the easiest last year, so they shortened the DRS. I heard Lewis Hamilton was saying that the DRS was too short. I think for them, with the high downforce, it was too short. For Red Bull, it was too long, because at the start-finish line, he overtook Leclerc, and he was open to braking on the outside for turn 1. So if you take one car, it was too long. If you take another car, it was too short. So I guess it was about the calculations that the FIA do, after seeing last year's races and Baku and Miami, were on the high side in terms of overtaking and how easy it was. For the FIA, there really is no winning here, because of what Alonso's pointed out. Every car is different. Red Bull only need a tiny amount of DRS to fly past whoever they're trying to overtake. Mercedes think they need DRS on every single straight to make overtakes. Of course, the lack of DRS in Miami didn't stop Lewis from going from 13th to 6th during the race. Drivers will always complain if they think it will give them an advantage. You might think this is something new to the sport, to which I say you're wearing rose-tinted glasses, or you've been following F1 since the 70s. This has been going on forever, just not always in front of the media. After the explosive team principals meeting in Canada last year, when Toto Wolff lost his head complaining about porpoising, the Alpine team boss Otmar Safnauer said, "You know, everybody does what they can to influence the FIA, Formula 1 management, to write the rules in such a way that suits them, and that's been going on forever. You know, sometimes it happens in front of the cameras, but mostly it happens behind the scenes. So we all try to pull in our own direction, and it's understandable. This lobbying will continue forever, as it always has. So next time you hear a complaint from a driver about something, just stop and think for a second. How does that change help them?" Let us know your thoughts on the DRS complaints in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.